Imagine for a moment a warship so powerful that it makes even the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy stop in their tracks. A ship that defies every rule we thought we knew about the universe. Imagine the kind of ship that doesn't just break the laws of physics and it completely rewrites them. No one knows where it came from, no one knows who built it. But everyone, from the most powerful to the most insignificant species, knows one thing. It's coming. And it's terrifying. When this ship appears on the radar of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations, they think they can handle it. They've seen wars before, they've faced threats that seemed impossible. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared them for what was about to unfold. This warship wasn't just a vessel of destruction, it was a living nightmare. Its ability to warp space, to manipulate time, to move across vast distances in the blink of an eye. These were things that no one, not even the most advanced species in the galaxy, could comprehend. And as the first fleets of the galaxy's most powerful forces gathered to face it, they realized they were about to witness something they hadn't counted on. A warship that didn't play by any of the rules they understood. At first, there was disbelief. A warship of this size, this power, couldn't exist, could it? It was too advanced, too far beyond anything they had ever seen. And yet there it was, drifting silently in the void of space. What happened next would change everything. It didn't attack at first. It didn't need to. Its presence alone was enough to send a ripple of fear through every species that came into contact with it. Every communication, every ship that ventured near it was met with a sudden, inexplicable silence. The warship, as if sensing the fear it created, seemed to grow in power. The laws of gravity were disrupted. Time itself began to warp, and the ships that tried to approach it disappeared. In the distance, galaxies trembled, planets whispered of its arrival, and every intelligent being across the universe knew one thing. A new kind of power had entered the galaxy, and no one, not even the greatest minds in the universe, knew how to stop it. The galaxy had seen its fair share of battles, wars that spanned star systems, clashes between civilizations, and catastrophic battles between powerful empires. Species came and went, and in their wake, they left stories of destruction, terror, and triumph. But no one, not even the most battle-hardened species, had ever faced anything quite like what was about to arrive. In the vastness of space, where time felt endless and possibilities were infinite, the idea of a species or a weapon, so powerful that it could bend the very fabric of space, seemed impossible. Yet the arrival of this warship shattered that illusion. It wasn't a part of any known fleet. It wasn't sent by any known species. It simply appeared, without warning, without explanation, and without mercy. The first time it was detected, it wasn't with a loud announcement or a sudden burst of energy. No, it was much quieter than that. An anomaly. A ripple in space that caught the attention of one of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. A species known for its exceptional intelligence and technological prowess. The Zinthar. They had long prided themselves on their ability to track and anticipate cosmic events. They had never seen anything like this. At first they thought it was a glitch, perhaps an asteroid, a rogue signal or some natural occurrence that they hadn't accounted for. But when the anomaly moved, impossibly fast, against the gravitational currents of space, the Zinthar knew they had made a terrible mistake. The anomaly wasn't a glitch, it was real. It was a warship, and a ship that defied physics and logic. Send the signal. Alert the High Command, the Zinthar commander ordered, his voice trembling for the first time in decades. We have a problem. By the time the rest of the galaxy caught wind of this strange new presence, The ship had already passed through several star systems, silently observing, leaving chaos in its wake. Each world it passed grew colder, as if time itself began to stretch and strain around it. Ships that ventured too close vanished without a trace. Communication signals from distant outposts became garbled and incoherent. Data streams were corrupted. Ships, once reliable and sturdy, were found adrift, with no signs of life aboard. They had all gone silent, as if the very essence of their existence had been erased. The word spread quickly, faster than anyone could have expected. Species that had once scoffed at the idea of humans being a threat now looked to their own weapons, wondering if they were enough. And in the heart of this uncertainty, humanity, long thought to be a myth, a mere legend, found themselves thrust into the center of a galactic crisis. At first, humanity, like everyone else, didn't fully understand what was happening. The stories of the warship were dismissed by most as hyperbole, even among humans. But when the first human spacecraft, the Horizon, encountered the warship at the edge of the Orion Belt, it became painfully clear. Humanity was not just a distant observer in this galactic struggle. They were part of it. The Horizon, a ship equipped with some of the most advanced technology humanity had ever produced, came into contact with the warship just as it was passing through the system. The ship attempted to establish communication, but the message it received wasn't one of peace or inquiry. It was a warning. The Horizon's instruments went haywire as soon as it approached, sending garbled signals to Earth that contained only one phrase: "Do not approach." The Zinthar and other galactic leaders were watching, waiting, and preparing. They had all assumed that when humanity was forced to confront this unknown entity, they would falter. They had been wrong. Humanity, despite centuries of relative isolation, still had something no other species had considered: a raw, unrelenting will to survive. And as soon as the Horizon sent out its distress signal, Earth mobilized. In an instant, human forces began working together with a unity never before seen. The threat had arrived, and humanity was going to fight for their place in the galaxy. The warship, now in the far reaches of space, continued its silent march toward Earth. It wasn't rushing. It didn't need to. It was a force of nature, beyond any species' comprehension. And yet, for the first time in galactic history, every species on every corner of the universe was afraid of one thing: that humanity, a species they thought had long vanished, might be the only ones left to stop it. First contact, a terrifying discovery. The moment the warship entered human space, everything changed. Earth, having barely recovered from its previous battles, now faced something far more insidious. An enemy that didn't just possess superior technology, but one that could break the very laws that governed existence itself. Humanity's first encounter with the warship was chilling. It didn't arrive with the usual signs of a hostile fleet. There were no enormous shock waves or blasts of energy signaling its entry. It simply appeared. A lone vessel, hovering at the edge of the solar system, its massive frame barely visible, at first, until it emerged fully into view, casting a shadow that seemed to distort reality itself. The Horizon, the human warship that had tried to communicate with it, was the first to get within range. The crew, seasoned but unsettled by the unexplained signals they were receiving, approached the massive ship with a sense of foreboding. Its surface was sleek and obsidian black, reflecting nothing, as if the ship existed outside the ordinary constraints of space itself. Captain Elias Grant, leader of the Horizon, ordered his team to prepare for anything. He had seen many strange things in his time, but nothing like this. As the Horizon drew closer, they tried to scan the warship, but their instruments went haywire the moment they crossed a certain distance. Systems began failing one by one. The ship's massive gravitational pull distorted the data, warping the very fabric of time as it approached. "Captain," said Lieutenant Rojas, her voice barely above a whisper, "we can't lock onto it. Our sensors are malfunctioning. I've never seen anything like this." Captain Grant remained silent, staring at the warship. It loomed in space like a silent sentinel, motionless yet somehow menacing. The crew, trained for every possible encounter, were paralyzed. It wasn't just the ship that was unnerving. It was the way space itself seemed to warp around it, bending in ways that shouldn't have been possible. Suddenly, without warning, a pulse of energy erupted from the warship, striking the horizon. It wasn't a blast of conventional weaponry, nor was it some kind of advanced energy beam. It was something far worse, a pulse that seemed to collapse the space around them, pulling the ship into a stasis field. The crew was thrown into disarray, as the very fabric of reality twisted around them. "What in the hell was that?" Grant asked, his voice filled with awe and terror as his ship was caught in the warship's grasp. We're stuck, sir," Rojas shouted as her console flickered erratically. "It's like the laws of physics are bending around us." The warship, almost as if responding to their helplessness, released them from its grip with an unsettling calmness, sending a final pulse that shattered their communications and left them in total isolation. The horizon limped back to Earth, its crew disoriented, terrified, and unable to fully explain what they had witnessed. As the crew of the Horizon returned, humanity was left with an overwhelming sense of dread. They had just encountered a force so far beyond their comprehension that even their most advanced minds struggled to make sense of it. But what was even more disturbing was the fact that the warship, which had shown no interest in attacking, seemed to be silently observing Earth, studying them in a way that didn't just threaten their physical safety, it threatened the very nature of their reality. Scientists around the world scrambled to analyze the warship's effects on the horizon. Reports came in that space-time had been altered, with pockets of time appearing to move slower or faster depending on proximity to the ship. Energy readings were impossible to interpret. Nothing in their knowledge of the universe could explain how this warship operated. It wasn't just another enemy. It was something entirely different, and it was terrifying. The most chilling discovery came from Dr. Fiona Price, a leading physicist who had been working on the analysis of the warship's effects. As she examined the data, her face turned pale. "It's not just a ship," she said, her voice trembling. "It's a violation of the laws of physics. What we're dealing with isn't just an advanced technology. It's something else. It's rewriting the rules of the universe. It's breaking the laws of nature itself." News of the warship's arrival spread quickly across Earth, and panic began to set in. How could humanity fight something that defied reality? The greatest minds on Earth worked tirelessly to try to understand the ship's origin, its power, and most importantly, its intentions. But the more they studied it, the less they understood. It wasn't just the warship they had to worry about. It was the ripple effect it was causing in the very fabric of the cosmos. In the wake of the Horizon's return, Earth's military leaders met with the world's top scientists, trying to devise a plan. They had to prepare for the worst, but they also knew something far more dangerous could be at play. If the warship could bend time and space, what else was it capable of? Could it destroy entire planets? Or worse, could it erase entire civilizations from existence? Humanity was facing an enemy unlike any other. A ship that didn't just represent a physical threat, but one that could shatter the very structure of the universe. The warship wasn't just terrifying because of its firepower. It was terrifying because it made all the rules humanity had once trusted meaningless. And as the humans scrambled to come up with a defense, one question lingered. In the air, if this warship can break every law of physics, what happens when it decides to move against us? The warship's power. What it can do as humanity grappled with the reality of the warship's terrifying arrival, it became clear that their initial encounter was only the beginning of something far more dangerous. The warship wasn't just a technological marvel. It was an embodiment of the unknown, an entity that existed outside the scope of their understanding of the universe. Every test, every scan, every attempt to understand its power only deepened the mystery. What made the warship so terrifying wasn't just its enormous size, its otherworldly technology, or its ability to instantly destroy anything in its path. No, it was the way it bent the very laws of physics. It wasn't bound by the rules that governed space, time, or gravity. And as the weeks passed, scientists began to witness just how far this power extended. Dr. Fiona Price, the physicist who had first recognized the warship's ability to violate the laws of nature, was among the first to attempt to quantify its abilities. She and her team had been studying its effects on Earth's communication systems in the horizon since the return of the human warship. The initial readings they gathered were enough to send shivers down anyone's spine. It's like the universe itself is trying to resist this ship, Dr. Price said one morning after reviewing the latest data. Every time we attempt to analyze its energy readings, we run into these anomalies, gaps in space-time. We can't even determine how its engines are propelling it forward. There's no exhaust, no measurable energy output, it just moves. The warship seemed to ignore all the usual signs of conventional propulsion. Its engines, designed to produce immense amounts of energy to power such a massive vessel, emitted nothing detectable. Its path was not dictated by gravitational forces or basic mechanics. It glided effortlessly through space as though it existed in a realm where normal rules of propulsion didn't apply. Some believed it could bend light itself, disappearing from view and reappearing elsewhere in a way that defied logic. The true extent of its power wasn't fully realized until the warship made its first public demonstration. It hovered silently in space over one of the human colonies located in the outer rim of the solar system. The inhabitants, knowing of the warship's eerie presence, anxiously watched from their city domes, hoping the threat would subside. But instead they witnessed something so horrifying that it would be etched in their minds forever. Without warning, the warship's gravitational field seemed to shift. A ripple of energy coursed from the ship's core, stretching across the entire colony in a matter of seconds. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then the buildings began to shake, first gently, then violently. The entire colony started to collapse under the force. Gravity itself had been altered. The residents scrambled in panic as everything they knew about their environment changed. The ground beneath their feet twisted. Their bodies felt heavier than they ever had before. It wasn't just a physical force. It was as though the warship had rewritten the rules of physics in real time, manipulating the very fabric of space to cause chaos. It wasn't an attack in the traditional sense. There were no missiles, no explosions. The warship didn't need to fire a single shot. All it had to do was make a subtle shift in its gravitational field, and the world it targeted began to crumble. "We've never seen anything like this," Dr. Price later said, analyzing the data from the disaster. The warship didn't fire a weapon. It didn't launch anything. It just twisted space itself. It's as if the ship doesn't need to follow the same laws of physics that we do. The devastating effects of this phenomenon were felt on a planetary scale. Not only did the warship manipulate gravity, but it also began to affect time. When ships attempted to approach it, their clocks were out of sync with the rest of the galaxy. Seconds became minutes, hours became days. It was as though time itself was being stretched and pulled in every direction around the warship. The military, unable to make sense of it, began to plan their response. Human forces attempted to approach the warship's position in space, thinking that perhaps it could be disabled by conventional means. But each time they attempted to approach, the laws of motion and velocity themselves seemed to betray them. Ships that tried to get too close would suddenly lose power, their engines turning off as though they were no longer connected to the fabric of space. One of the human warships, the Eagle, made a brave attempt to engage the warship directly. Armed with the most advanced weapons Earth had ever developed, the Eagle launched a barrage of laser fire at the warship's hull. For a moment it seemed to have no effect. But as the lasers made contact, the warship did something unfathomable. The beams of energy bent and curved in midair, deflecting off its surface and striking the Eagle itself. The warship absorbed the energy, then returned it, amplified. The Eagle was torn apart in an instant, its wreckage scattered across the void. "We're not even scratching the surface," Captain Ella Price, the commander of the Eagle, said, moments before the ship was destroyed. It's like it's alive. Like it has a mind of its own." Humanity now faced an unimaginable enemy, an enemy whose technology seemed beyond comprehension, whose power defied every law of nature they had studied. The galaxy's most powerful fleets had nothing that could even come close to matching the warship's strength. The warship didn't need to fight the way other civilizations did. It didn't need weapons or shields or armies. All it needed was its presence, its ability to manipulate the laws of the universe itself. And in the face of that, humanity was left with one inescapable truth. They were facing something more than just a weapon. They were facing a force of nature, something so fundamentally different that even their greatest minds couldn't comprehend its origin or its purpose. The warship wasn't just the most advanced weapon in the galaxy. It was something far worse, a reminder that there were forces in the universe that were older and far more dangerous than anything humanity could ever imagine. The enemy reacts, strategies and countermeasures as the warship continued its relentless march through the galaxy. Fear and confusion spread like wildfire. The most powerful and feared species in the galaxy, who had once dominated the stars with their technology and weapons, were now left powerless against an enemy that didn't play by any of the rules. The galaxy had always prided itself on its superior weapons, its fleets, its military strategies. But nothing had prepared them for this. The galaxy's most elite military forces, the Zinthar, the Krenari, and the Tetrax, met in secret councils to discuss their next move. They couldn't afford to be passive anymore. The warship had already begun to dismantle entire colonies, its presence rewriting the very laws of reality around it. Time and space were no longer predictable, and all their sophisticated tactics seemed useless against an enemy they couldn't even begin to understand. "We are facing an enemy that has no equivalent," Commander Deloric of the Zinthar declared in a tense meeting, his sharp features tight with anger and fear. "Our most advanced fleet weapons are useless against it. Our ships can't even get close. We need a new strategy, one that doesn't rely on conventional means." Admiral Kalin, the Tetrax war leader, folded his arms in thought. "The warship doesn't just break the laws of physics, it bends them to its will. We've already lost entire fleets trying to engage it directly. We can't destroy it the way we destroy our enemies, but perhaps we can find a way to trap it to limit its movement. What if we attempt to overwhelm it?" General Mara of the Krenari suggested, though her voice lacked confidence. "Our forces outnumber it. If we send enough ships—" "No," Deloric interjected, shaking his head. "The moment we approach, it warps space and disables our ships. It has already demonstrated that it can fight without conventional weaponry. Overwhelming it with numbers will only lead to more losses." The realization set in. This was no ordinary enemy. The warship's abilities were beyond comprehension. Its powers were not just physical, they were fundamentally cosmic, altering the very structure of reality itself. The idea of conventional warfare was becoming obsolete. The galaxy needed something new, something innovative. They needed a plan that could counter the warship's manipulation of space-time. In a desperate attempt to understand the warship's weaknesses, the galaxy's best scientists and strategists were called to action. They studied everything from the first encounter with the Horizon to the devastating attack on the colony. One thing became clear: no weapon, no force could stand against the warship in direct confrontation. They had to think differently. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. Dr. Fiona Price, the same physicist who had first noticed the warship's manipulation of gravity and time, proposed a theory. If the warship could bend space and time, it might also be susceptible to distortions of its own. What if they could create an anomaly strong enough to interfere with its manipulation of the laws of physics? Could they reverse the effect, disrupting its control over time and space? Price and her team worked day and night, designing a device that could generate a counterfield, one that would create a controlled ripple in space-time. It was a long shot, a gamble, really, but it was the only chance humanity had. The device wouldn't be able to destroy the warship, but it could momentarily disrupt its ability to manipulate gravity, time, and space, giving humanity a fleeting opportunity to strike. The plan was put into motion. The fleet, now assembled and ready, positioned itself at the farthest edge of the galaxy, just beyond the warship's known path. They knew the warship would eventually come their way. It had already destroyed entire fleets, leaving chaos in its wake, and now it was heading toward a series of human colonies. Price's team activated the device, a colossal, experimental, energy generator capable of producing a distortion in space-time. For a moment, nothing happened. The silence was deafening. Then, the ripples began. At first, it was subtle. The warship's sensors registered the disturbance, but it didn't respond immediately. It continued its approach, perhaps unaware of the danger that was approaching it. The device began to amplify the disturbance, creating a vortex in space, a localized field where the laws of physics began to behave erratically. Time slowed in pockets around the device, and the fabric of space itself began to fracture. Suddenly, the warship's massive hull shuddered. The shimmering black surface of the ship flickered as if it were experiencing a glitch. For a brief moment it seemed vulnerable. Its ability to manipulate space-time faltered. It was a small window, but it was the first real opportunity humanity had to strike. The human fleet, led by the victory and the pride of Earth, launched their attack. It wasn't a full-out assault. The goal wasn't to destroy the warship, but to force it into a retreat. Their ships, equipped with experimental weapons designed to exploit the temporary weakness, bombarded the warship with concentrated energy blasts. The shots weren't enough to breach its hull, but they were enough to rattle it. For the first time since its arrival, the warship showed signs of distress. The field that had once been impenetrable now flickered and warped. Space itself seemed to react violently, as if struggling to regain control of the warship's influence. But even as the warship began to stagger, the human fleet knew they couldn't afford to let up. The moment the warship regained its bearings, it would be back to its normal, terrifying self. This was a chance, perhaps their only chance, to force it into a retreat, to buy humanity enough time to figure out a more permanent solution. And so, the battle raged on. The human fleet, though outmatched, pressed forward. They didn't know if they could defeat this enemy, but they had learned one crucial thing. The warship was not invincible. It could be challenged. The galaxy's greatest minds had not yet found a way to destroy it, but for the first time they saw hope. Humanity had thrown the first punch, and maybe, just maybe, they had a chance to win this war, turning the tide. A new hope. The galaxy had watched in stunned silence as the warship's seemingly invincible power began to waver. Humanity's unexpected strike had done more than just disrupt the warship. It had shown the galaxy something it hadn't dared to believe, that despite the warship's overwhelming power, it was not invincible. It could be challenged. And even if the odds were against them, humanity could fight back. After the brief but intense battle, the warship retreated, momentarily vanishing into the dark void of space, just as suddenly as it had arrived. The damage to the warship had been minimal, but the psychological toll on the forces fighting against it was immense. The galaxy's greatest civilizations had come face to face with an enemy they couldn't defeat with sheer power, and yet, humanity had found a way to inflict a wound, however small, in its unassailable armor. In the aftermath, humanity's leaders convened once again, this time in the wake of their unexpected victory. The scientists and engineers who had worked alongside Dr. Fiona Price began to study the data from the battle, the anomaly that the warship's presence had created in space-time itself. The temporary disruption had shown them something valuable. The warship was not entirely in control of its own power. There were weaknesses, but they had to find a way to exploit them. "We know now that we can't defeat this warship with our conventional weapons," Dr. Price said in a conference attended by the galaxy's leading experts. "But we've learned something crucial. It's not invulnerable, it's just different. And the key to winning lies in how we exploit its own control over space-time." As humanity gathered the brightest minds to develop a counter-strategy, something remarkable began to unfold. The warship had shown its vulnerabilities, even if they were brief, and now humanity had an opportunity to understand it better than ever before. Armed with the knowledge of the warship's physics-bending capabilities, humanity was no longer fighting blindly. While the military strategists worked on the next steps, the political leaders of Earth knew this moment was critical. If humanity could turn the tide and force the warship into a permanent retreat, it could mean the difference between survival and annihilation. The world stood united, its people driven by one purpose: to end the reign of terror that had descended upon them. For the first time since the warship's arrival, the warship's next move was uncertain. It seemed to hesitate, as if it was aware that something had changed. Its once impervious edge had been chipped away. What had once seemed like a one-sided battle was now a contest between two powerful forces, each with their own strategy, each pushing the other to their limits. As the warship made its next move, humanity's leaders put their plan into action. The galaxy's most powerful forces, once fragmented and unsure, had now found a common cause. They had seen that the warship's power could be limited, and they were now determined to finish what humanity had started. It was time for the second phase of the plan, creating a weapon capable of forcing the warship into a retreat once again, and hopefully permanently. Months passed as Earth and its allies worked tirelessly. What emerged from this intense period of development was an unprecedented weapon, a device designed to disrupt the warship's space-time manipulation on a larger scale. Unlike the previous experiment, this weapon wouldn't just disrupt the warship's powers temporarily. It would create a stable, localized pocket of normality, a bubble of space-time where the warship would lose its ability to manipulate the universe around it. The weapon was a massive, experimental creation, housed aboard the newly constructed human warship Indomitable. This ship was humanity's last stand, carrying the hopes of an entire species in its hold, and with it humanity would finally take the fight to the warship. Admiral Colin of the Tetrax, Commander Deloric of the Zinthar, and General Mara of The Krenari all stood together in the war room as Indomitable prepared for launch. Their fleets, though battered, were unified. Together they would strike at the heart of the warship's power and for the first time try to force it into retreat. "We've seen what it can do," Admiral Kalen said gravely, his gaze steady. "Now it's time to make it feel what we can do. For every life it's taken, for every world it's destroyed, we'll give it the one thing it's never had to face. Resistance." The plan was simple, but risky. Indomitable and its allied ships would move into the warship's path, and just as the warship began to manipulate space-time, the new device would be activated. The hope was that the bubble of space-time would stabilize, neutralizing the warship's powers long enough for the fleet to launch a direct assault. The stakes couldn't have been higher. As Indomitable and the fleet moved toward the warship's location, a strange calm descended over the crew. There was no room for doubt, no room for fear. This was humanity's moment to prove that no force, no matter how powerful, could ever extinguish their will to survive. When the warship appeared on the scanners, a familiar terror gripped the fleet. It was more massive than ever before, more imposing. Its sheer presence bent the universe around it, and for a moment, it felt like the warship was about to break them all. But then, something changed. The warship's distortion began to falter. Device worked. A shimmering field erupted around Indomitable, and the fabric of space-time began to stabilize. Time, once warped, returned to its proper flow. The warship's powerful gravitational pull weakened. Its ability to manipulate reality with ease diminished. The fleet attacked. The warship, for the first time, was forced to fight under normal conditions. The battle raged as Indomitable and the human ships fired their weapons, exploiting every weak point that had been discovered in the warship's structure. For once the tables had turned. The warship, despite its overwhelming power, was no longer invulnerable. And with every strike, humanity was one step closer to victory. As the warship began to stagger, it finally made a decision. In a flash, it vanished, disappearing into the void, retreating once again. The battle was over. The warship had been forced to flee, its powers rendered ineffective by humanity's ingenuity. The galaxy, still trembling from the encounter, could only breathe a collective sigh of relief. Humanity had shown the universe what it was capable of. Against all odds, it had struck back. The final push, the last stand-in, the aftermath of the unexpected victory, the galaxy still found itself on edge. The warship had retreated, but for how long? It was clear now that this battle wasn't just a singular event. Humanity and its allies had drawn a line in the sand, and while they had succeeded in forcing the warship into a temporary retreat, they knew the warship would not stay down for long. The galaxy's leaders convened in secret once more. The warship had shown them the depths of its power, and despite their triumph, they all knew that the next encounter would be far worse. This had been a warning. It had been a wake-up call. They couldn't afford to wait for another attack. They needed to act now before the warship could regroup and return stronger than ever. "We've made a mistake," General Mara of the Krenari said gravely as the meeting began. "We thought we could defeat it by simply fighting back. But this warship is more than just a weapon. It's a force of nature. If we don't end this now, it will come back to destroy everything we've built." Admiral Colleen nodded in agreement, his stern expression betraying his growing concern. "This time we can't afford to rely on our usual tactics. The warship doesn't follow the rules of warfare. It doesn't obey the laws of physics. The only way to win this fight is to fight smarter, not harder. If we give it a chance to regroup, we may never get another one." The reality was clear. The warship's last retreat was not a sign of weakness. It was a brief moment of uncertainty. It had been forced to flee only because humanity had found a temporary crack in its otherwise impenetrable defense. The warship, despite all its power, was not invincible, but it was relentless. It would come back. And when it did, the galaxy would have to face it head-on. With this realization, the decision was made. The final assault would be launched. Humanity and its allies would leave nothing to chance. The combined fleet, now bolstered by human ingenuity and technology, prepared for a decisive final strike. The Indomitable, the flagship of humanity's fleet, was equipped with the newly developed weapons that had proved effective during their previous skirmish. But this time, it wasn't just about disrupting the warship's powers. It was about ending the threat once and for all. The stakes were higher than ever before. As the fleets gathered at the outer rim of the solar system, they faced a terrifying unknown. The warship was coming, and this time, there would be no retreat. The plan was simple: hit hard, hit fast, and make sure that the warship couldn't escape. This was humanity's final chance to prevent annihilation. They had to take everything they had learned from the previous encounters and apply it all in one final push. "We know what it can do," Captain Elias Grant, leader of the Indomitable, said to his crew as they prepared for the battle. "We've seen the way it warps space and bends time. We've felt its power. But now we have the advantage. We know its weaknesses. We know its vulnerabilities. And we will not rest until it's defeated." The fleets advanced toward the warship's last known location, a dark and ominous sector of space. The warship's return was imminent. And as the minutes ticked by, the tension in the fleet was palpable. This wasn't just another battle. This was the final battle for humanity's survival, a chance to prove that no matter how overwhelming the odds, humanity would rise to the challenge. The warship appeared on the scanners like a shadow in the distance. It moved with the same eerie silence that had marked its previous encounters. And just like before, its gravitational field began to distort space around it. But this time humanity was ready. The fleet had adjusted its approach, anticipating the warship's every move. As the warship grew closer, the fleet activated its newly developed weapon, a massive energy pulse capable of creating a stable gravitational field that would trap the warship in place, neutralizing its ability to manipulate space-time. It was a risky maneuver, and there was no guarantee it would work. But there was no other choice. The pulse fired. For a moment, nothing happened. The warship continued its advance as if unaffected. The tension in the fleet reached a breaking point. Had they failed? Was it already too late? Then the unimaginable happened. The warship's movement slowed. Its gravitational field, once invincible, began to falter. The bubble of space-time around it began to shrink. And for the first time since its arrival, the warship appeared to struggle. "We've got it!" shouted Lieutenant Rojas, her voice filled with disbelief. "It's not moving." Humanity's fleet opened fire. They had prepared for this moment, and now they unleashed everything they had. Explosive energy blasts surged from the Indomitable and its allies, hammering into the warship's hull. The weapons that had once seemed useless against its impenetrable defenses now found their mark. The warship, no longer able to bend space and time to its will, was forced to endure the full brunt of the attack. For a moment, it seemed as if the warship might still escape, its engines sputtering as if trying to regain control. But the fleet held its ground, continuing the bombardment, refusing to give up. And then, with a deafening explosion, the warship's core collapsed. The fleet watched in stunned silence as the warship disintegrated before their eyes. Its massive frame shattered, sending debris scattering through space. For the first time in the history of the galaxy, the warship, the terrifying, incomprehensible force that had bent the universe itself, had been defeated. But victory was bittersweet. Humanity's victory came at a high cost. Thousands of the lives had been lost in the battle, fleets had been destroyed, and though the warship had been defeated, its legacy would haunt the galaxy for generations. The warship's defeat wasn't just the end of a battle, it was the end of an era. And as the galaxy watched the remnants of the warship drift through space, one thing was clear. Humanity had proven that no matter how terrifying the odds, no matter how impossible the fight, they would always rise. Aftermath and reflection. The legacy of the warship as the warship's shattered remnants drifted into the cold expanse of space. A heavy silence descended upon the galaxy. The battle was over, and humanity had won. The warship, once a symbol of unimaginable power, had been destroyed, but the victory felt hollow. The damage had been done. The galaxy was forever changed, its understanding of space, time, and physics irreparably shaken. On Earth, the celebrations were muted. Leaders from every corner of the galaxy had sent their congratulations, their admiration for humanity's bravery and ingenuity. But there was no rejoicing. The costs had been too high. Too many lives had been lost. Too many planets had been destroyed. Humanity had faced an enemy unlike anything they had ever imagined. And while they had won, the scars of the conflict would linger for generations. The leaders of the galaxy gathered in a summit, convened by the United Earth Federation, to discuss the next steps. Earth's role in the galaxy had forever changed. They had proven they were more than just a forgotten species, more than a myth. Humanity had fought back against the greatest force the galaxy had ever seen. And though they had won the battle, the galaxy knew that the warship's legacy would have lasting consequences. Admiral Colin of the Tetrax, once a fierce critic of humanity, now stood in awe of the human resolve. "We fought for survival," he said, addressing the gathered leaders. But it was more than that. It was a fight for the very fabric of the galaxy. The warship was more than just a weapon. It was a reminder of the dangers lurking beyond our understanding, a reminder that we must always remain vigilant. Dr. Fiona Price, the physicist whose research had helped lead humanity's successful counterattack, stood beside the admiral, her face grim. "The warship's power wasn't just technological," she said. "It was a manipulation of the fundamental forces that govern existence. We don't fully understand how or why it existed, but what we've learned is that the fabric of reality can be altered, twisted, and manipulated. The warship was only one example. There may be others, and we must prepare for that possibility." The realization hit hard. The galaxy had faced its greatest fear, and humanity had emerged victorious. But the fear wasn't over. The warship may have been destroyed, but its legacy had opened a door to a deeper, darker mystery. The question now was not just how to rebuild, but how to defend against forces that could break the very laws of physics themselves. Earth's leaders knew this battle was only the beginning. The galaxy had learned to respect humanity in a way it never had before. But respect wasn't enough to guarantee peace. Humanity had been tested, and the galaxy would be too. Back on Earth, a sense of unity had emerged from the ashes of the war. Despite the losses, despite the horrors they had faced, humanity had learned something invaluable. Their will to survive, their ingenuity, and their resolve were their greatest strengths. The victory over the warship wasn't just a military triumph. It was a testament to the indomitable human spirit. Ambassador Clara Mendez, who had helped broker the initial peace talks with the galaxy's powers, stood before the United Earth Federation addressing a crowd of millions. "We've proven that humanity is not just a legend. We've proven that we can rise against the impossible and come out on the other side. But this war has shown us that we are not alone in the universe. There are forces out there we can't even begin to comprehend, and we must be ready. We will stand united, not just as humans, but as a beacon of hope for all sentient life in the galaxy. Her words resonated with people across the world, from the bustling cities of New Earth to the quiet colonies on the Outer Rim. Humanity had won, but the galaxy still needed to rebuild, and the scars of war would take time to heal. The warship had forced them to confront the unknown, but it had also shown them the boundless potential of human strength and unity. The final battle had not just been against a warship, but against an idea. The idea that humanity, a once ignored species, could ever stand against the mightiest forces in the galaxy. And humanity had not only survived, it had overcome. It had demonstrated that when pushed to the brink, humanity could defy even the most terrifying odds. As Earth began its slow recovery, scientists, military leaders, and philosophers alike pondered the future. The galaxy had been shaken to its core, and there were new questions to ask. What else could exist out there? What other unknown forces lurked in the darkness, waiting to challenge everything they knew? But as the sun set over Earth's cities, one thing was certain. Humanity was no longer a forgotten species. They were a force to be reckoned with. The warship was gone, but the lessons it had taught would echo across the galaxy for centuries to come. The fabric of reality had been twisted, but humanity's resolve had remained unbroken. And as long as humanity stood united, no force, no matter how powerful, could ever erase their existence again.